On this episode of In Your Neighborhood, we've found two of my favorite things in Bloomsburg: bread and beer.
I think our slowest speed is still faster than the competitors' fastest speeds.
All the things that we do on the internet today, it encompasses our life totally.
I search the web like everybody else. I'm a YouTuber and
downloading music, watching live stream videos, Facebooking.
But now that the wideband 50's out, you could have multiple gamers in one household and it's going to be able to support the load.
you need that faster speed, obviously.
Everything is about speed and reliability, and that's what we offer.
Are you bored? Don't just sit around. There's a whole backyard waiting to be explored. Check out the Columbia Montour Visitors Bureau website, your #1 source for local event information happening right here in your neighborhood. With the area's largest online event calendar, the possibilities are endless for your local entertainment, races, live theater, festivals, you name it. Sign up to receive their weekly events email or their quarterly events magazine, both completely free. Visit itourcolumbiamontour.com. That's itourcolumbiamontour.com.
Welcome to In Your Neighborhood, I'm Jennifer Wakeman. Columbia County bread and granola sprouted from one man's desire to craft a great loaf of bread. Cartoonist Doug Michael moved here from New Orleans after the flooding on Fishing Creek in 2006.
We moved here because my girlfriend had a cottage on Fishing Creek that was flooded, and we didn't want to tear it down and let it go, so we thought, well, if we were going to fix that cottage, we got to come here. And that meant she had to find a job. So she applied to the university. It turned out they had an opening in her field. They hired her. We were pretty amazed. I really didn't think that was going to happen. But I moved here thinking I have no idea what I'm going to do in this town. So, but I had this other occupation besides cartooning that was making bread. It had been an obsession really for years and years and years, and had experimented with it, failed, given it up, came back. But when we moved to Bloomsburg, the house we bought had a convection oven. And that just seemed to make a huge difference.
Once he had a recipe he liked, Doug decided to use that convection oven to start a small business.
My home kitchen was certified, built the cart, went out that summer, 20 or so loaves, and immediately got a following, a very small following.
A series of events from that one farmer's market propelled Doug's business forward, the most important of which was meeting Michael Perakovich in 2010. Michael took Doug's original bread recipe and through a lot of trial and error came up with the recipe they use today for a yeast-free, flourless bread.
Initially it was like I start with sprouted wheat, and then I would grind it into a mash. But at that point it alters because I would add yeast. And I would also, at the end, I would work in flour. Basically to give it a finish, and I kind of liked the crust that the flour offered. But now we've eliminated, and entirely through Michael's ability, we've eliminated yeast. We just use a natural leaven, sourdough starter, and we've completely eliminated flour, which is just phenomenal. And when we talked about could we do this, I didn't know anybody anywhere that was making a bread like this.
Revolutionizing something as fundamental as bread can't be easy.
Creative process is sloppy and messy, and it's not a straight line. So as I remember it, there was just a bunch of failure. That's all I really remember, and struggle. There were a number of books that I had been reading that dealt with the health benefits of bread, which is a weird combination of words today when we think about bread. And one of them was avoiding the nutritional benefits of using a sourdough starter. So I really, and as far as the creative process, adding yeast was another thing to weigh, another ingredient that was variable, and I wanted to reduce as many variables as possible, just have it as elegant as possible. Occam's razor, it just needed to be that simple. And any more complicated, I didn't know how to do it, because as soon as I started adding yeast, it would wildly different in each batch, and I just didn't know where to go with that or how much. And So, yeah, keep it simple, stupid.
Sourdough starter certainly isn't new, but applying it to sprouted wheat rather than flour proved tricky.
I read a recipe for how to make a sourdough starter out of flour and just adapted it. It was a lot of what I call interpretive reading, because everything written is about flour. So how I had to translate that information about flour and bread making, which I really knew nothing about before I met Doug, but he was doing something completely different too, so I really knew nothing about bread making except from these books and what Doug had taught me, and then continued to just believe that it was going to work because it had to.
After removing yeast from the process, Michael was inspired to remove flour from the bread.
When I was doing this interpretive reading, found out that flour is nothing but the inside of the wheat berry. And since we were imbibing the water into the wheat berry during the sprouting process, another way of saying germinating the wheat seed, we were essentially creating dough inside the wheat berry already. All we had to do was turn it inside out. And there was our dough. So I would just hold my hand back and not add any flour, not add any flour, and see what would happen in the mixing bowl. Try different things, write down how long it took, write down how the weights and the water and the measurements, and just selectively go through it. But ultimately the final stage still included some of our own now sprouted wheat flour instead of buying flour from a store.
When the mill they used to make their sprouted wheat flour broke, Michael was forced to figure out how to completely eliminate flour from the entire process. Eventually, he did, but there was quite a bit of tweaking along the way.
After we got off flour, there were still issues with the bread that we needed to resolve.
As Michael said, it was a messy process with a lot of failures.
And week after week, he would come at me and he would say, as we looked at the bread, I remain optimistic.
and it would be ugly.
Yeah.
It would be terrible. Yeah. Why I remained optimistic is because our ingredients were always good. I tell our bakers today, we're not used car salesmen. We're not selling a bad product. Even when it wasn't beautiful, even when it was a dense loaf, we still had a good product.
At the same time Michael was experimenting with improvements to the bread recipe, Doug was focusing on another product, flax granola. A chance encounter at the farmer's market was another turning point for the business.
This is one of my customers in this very small town. Happened to meet this woman, and he was very excited. I remember the day he came to see me about her, and she was a nutritionist out of New York, something of a health nut, and I was going to offer him a loaf of my bread, but he said, no, she's not really into bread, and at that particular day, I happened to have some flax granola with me, and I had been developing it, not at all certain what I was going to do with it. More than likely was just going to drop the idea altogether. But I gave it to him and said, well, see what she thinks of this. It turns out that she was actually looking for this product and couldn't find it anywhere. I mean, it was just one of those unfathomable anomalies that, you can't plan for. She wrote a book, she went on Dr. Oz, she's been recommending our granola for some time. And that really just made everything fall into place for us in terms of having a business.
The book is called The Plan, written by Lynn-Janae Rositas. And right there on page 71, she recommends Columbia County bread and granola. Both Doug and Michael agree that having the income from the granola allowed them the freedom to experiment and truly revolutionize their bread.
The granola had to happen for the bread to happen. Once the granola fell into place and we were making money on the granola, I didn't care. I just wanted Michael to just take this idea that he had to see if he could make it work.
Sprouted wheat pocket pitas and flatbread crackers were added to the lineup of products. Both are made without flour. While I was talking with Michael about their bread, he said something that seemed very counterintuitive. When finishing the dough, they actually add water with a spray bottle to keep the dough from sticking. Anyone who has baked knows that you typically add flour at this point in the process. This one little discovery is what allowed Columbia County Bread and Granola to become a flourless operation.
When we had issues, I remember I would go to bakers and say, hey, we're having a problem, what do you recommend? And the advice invariably that I got was add more flour. Yeah. And it just was so discouraging. Yeah. And to think that we could get away entirely from flour was just such a like a revelation. It was just, that's the ideal that we want, because we're essentially trying to revolutionize what bread is. I mean, we feel very strongly that wheat is a great product. I mean, as a grain, it's miraculous that you can develop this thing called bread without anything else other than a scoop of wheat and some water and human manipulation to form it into something. That's really all we require.
Got a bread now that has 3 ingredients: sprouted wheat, water, and salt. And Doug has come up with this idea, and it's really brilliant. Our 4th ingredient is the baker, because that's what makes these ingredients into what they are. And the bread that you're eating typically on a day-to-day basis from the supermarket wasn't produced by a human being.
There are plenty of human beings in the kitchen at CCB&G.
There's AJ, who does the dough. Billy and Mike and Dave do pita and the final shaping, and Ian is on flatbread and pita, and he has a real feel for it. They're all just amazing to work with, a lot of fun, and they do good work. They take pride in it.
Prior to working at CCB&G, most of them had no baking experience. As it turns out, that was a plus.
If they had preconceived ideas of what baking was and what they could do, then I don't think they would have stuck with it.
Providing opportunities for the employees is an important aspect of the business.
When we talked about what this company might look like, one of the things that we sort of wanted to pull together was a guild and for the employees, so that they would have an opportunity to learn a trade and to develop some pride, but there would also be an opportunity to take a small portion of their paycheck every week, which the company would match. And then that would create a fund. And then if the employees needed that fund for any kind of emergency, or if they wanted to get involved in some kind of a community project, there was money there.
The shipping department recently moved off-site and became Jiminy Ship It, Bloomsburg's only authorized FedEx shipping center. Getting this business off the ground was an outgrowth of the Guild.
And I want to see that continue to develop, because I really think that's a big part of what we do, is making sure that we have people that really want to work here and feel valued.
During the spring and summer, you can find Columbia County bread and granola at Forks Farm Market, the Ferry Street Market in Danville, and the Lewisburg Farm Market. All of the products are also available on their website, columbiacountybread.com.
Right now we're promoting the Bread Club, because if you're local, I mean, if you're in the area, you can get to Bloomsburg. We'd like you to sign up with a club that will help us sustain through the winter months when we don't have the markets, and we can guarantee you bread in a lot of different varieties, and you can sample some of our other products as well at a pretty good price.
For everyone in the Service Electric viewing area, shipping is really speedy.
It would be overnight. You would get it the next day,
Yeah.
and that's fresher than the loaf you're getting in the grocery store. Even if it's out of the bakery section, that dough was probably shipped from New Jersey frozen and then just baked off in the bakery. So this dough would have been, it's made in the morning, baked at night, and shipped the next morning to your door. So it's about as fresh of a product as you can get.
Doug still credits Central Pennsylvania with being the perfect place to nurture his passion for bread.
This town has just proven magical in providing whatever it is that I needed to make this business actually come to life.
Coming up next on our Favorite Things episode, beer.